Chapter 320, Action. An abnormal reaction. From the looks of it, it really is a card of blasphemy. Above the gray fog, Klein, who received the reply, was delighted at first, but he then exclaimed in surprise, "Isn't Miss Justice way too efficient? I only entrusted the mission to her this afternoon, and she has already completed the verification by the evening. Furthermore, this is obviously past the closing time of the Royal Museum. A telepathist also definitely lacks infiltration abilities. Her family's influence is probably even greater than I expected." Thankfully, the verification didn't produce any strange phenomena. Otherwise, the only thing that can be done is to allow Miss Justice to act innocent and hand the card over to the higher authorities. And this also means that I'm not fated to have this treasure. There's nothing in this world with 100% certainty. Amidst his thoughts, Klein heard Miss Justice's subsequent question. "Mr. Fool, exactly what secret lies in that bookmark?" "Well, if your blessed is unwilling to give you the answer, just pretend that I didn't ask. Of course, the secret is that it hides a card of blasphemy inside." Klein was overjoyed as he silently sighed. After thinking it over carefully, he decided to wait until he obtained the card of blasphemy before replying to Miss Justice. Otherwise, she might appear too shocked and act strangely, causing his own actions to be negatively affected. Klein was in no hurry to return to the real world. He just sat there in the silent, empty old palace, thinking about when to act and how to do it. Miss Justice has done some damage to that bookmark, so I wonder if someone would later discover the damage. Otherwise, would the bookmark slowly show signs of abnormality and attract attention? Thus, I cannot afford to delay or wait. It would be best if I take action tonight. As all sorts of ideas churned through his mind, Klein gradually came to a decision. Then, on the basis of his morning observations, he conjured the layout of the Royal Museum's first floor and the general conditions surrounding it. Looking at this blueprint, Klein began going through different plans and quickly established a relatively safe plan. Finally, he made another divination to confirm the degree of danger. After seeing that nothing had changed, he returned to the real world and began making all sorts of preparations. What Klein originally wanted to do was to draw the pattern in his memory, forge a similar bookmark, and replace it after he had sneaked in via responding to himself. He wanted to ensure that no one noticed or know for a long time that the bookmark had been stolen. By the time it was discovered, it would be too late for others to trace the incident back to him. However, after much deliberation, he felt that this wasn't good. As long as the fake bookmark was discovered, the most suspicious person would be Miss Justice, who touched the original bookmark today. I can't put Miss Justice at risk for the sake of a treasure. She did this to help me. Klein finally figured out how to keep Miss Justice from being suspected. His plan was to not only steal the bookmark, but to also steal the surrounding items as well, including some of the lighter books. Phew! After finishing his preparations, Klein took out his gold pocket watch and opened it. He patiently waited until after 9. He wanted to act before midnight. If he were too early, people living around there wouldn't have started sleeping. That wouldn't satisfy his requirement for taking action. If he were too late, there would be almost no pedestrians on the streets. Just walking along the streets would make him be easily suspected, and during this period of time, the whole of Backland was under tight curfews due to serial murders. This was beneficial to Klein's operation, but it was also disadvantageous. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The needle kept ticking. As the night deepened, the crimson moon appeared and it was finally past 9. Putting the master key and other items in his pockets, he took his cane and first went to Eastborough to change his attire. Then, he rented a carriage several times until he reached a place quite far from King's Avenue in Westborough. By then, an hour and 45 minutes had already passed. His initial plan was actually nothing like this. He wanted to summon himself and respond to himself to become a spirit body. He wanted to rely on his extremely fast speed to cross the distance from Sherwood Borough to Westborough before infiltrating the Royal Museum. However, he eventually abandoned the plan because of the potentially high risks. Backland had more than one high-sequence beyonder. In a situation where a serial killer caused everyone to panic, yet remained unsolved for such a long time, there might be high-sequence Beyonders who were consciously using their Beyonder powers or corresponding sealed artifacts to monitor certain areas. The distance from Sherwood Borough to Westborough was neither too long nor too short, and the probability of being discovered was substantial if such a special spirit flew like this. This cannot be completely written off just because the divination result says that the risk isn't high, but there is the existence of certain danger. Because the divination doesn't give a direct answer, but a revelation that needs to be interpreted. In other words, the results of the risk isn't high, but there is the existence of certain danger, is built on the premise that I make a relatively good choice. Therefore, to be careful, Klein modified his original plan but retained the core idea. 2 Kings Avenue, Royal Museum. There were 4 security guards standing on top of a polygonal roof. Dressed in thick robes, they were enduring the cold of the autumn night as they carefully monitored their respective directions. Once anyone approached the museum, even if they were hidden by the trees or building shadows, it would be difficult to hide from their eyes. From this arrangement alone, it could be seen that the security company that had been employed was very professional. There's still half an hour before our shift ends. A security guard looked down at his companions who were patrolling the building and shook his body. In the museum, the remaining security personnel were divided into 4 groups. They patrolled the various exhibition halls in intervals according to different routes. In the showroom where Roselle's diary was kept, the Machinery Hivemind squad captain, Max Livermore, wore a monocle that allowed him to directly see wraiths, shadows, and other spirit-type monsters. He carried a lantern as he went back and forth to check on the area. Occasionally, he would head to the other halls to check on the situation. His 2 subordinates remained in the small hall next to Roselle's diary. However, there was an additional item on the glass display case. It was a collection of brightly colored blocks that had been pieced together into a miniature layout of the museum's first floor. This was also a sealed artifact. As long as those blocks were pieced into the shape of a corresponding building, they would be able to establish a connection with the real building. Once anyone intruded, its surface would react immediately by shrinking. Of course, there were quite a few limitations to this. The distance couldn't be too far, and it wouldn't work if the number of blocks it had wasn't enough to piece together the building. And without external help, it was almost impossible for people or items inside to leave. "Captain, do you really think someone will steal this notebook? I can't comprehend it at all," one of the team members asked in a bored tone when he saw Max coming back with his lantern. Max smiled and said, "Some people adore Roselle with zeal. It's not something you can understand. Some of them believe that they can crack it and only need more information for reference. Some of them believe that the symbols contain a mysterious power. As long as they can find the correct combination, they will gain Beyonder powers. In previous exhibitions, we would capture such criminals from time to time. So that's why we didn't hide the notebook away and place them in sealed areas. We are waiting for these people to surrender themselves," another teammate asked with enlightenment. Max nodded and said, "Who wouldn't want free meritorious deeds?" 18 Kings Avenue, outside a building next to a crossroad junction. Klein followed the shadows and shaded areas, using the master key from time to time to walk in a straight line before finally arriving here. He took out the plain brass key, pointed it at the kitchen door, and turned it silently. An imperceptible rippling happened as Klein entered the room. All the way through, he saw doors and walls, and without disturbing anyone, he found a storage room. This master key is really useful. However, both of its previous owners lost themselves and entered dangerous spots. It makes me afraid of continuously carrying it. Klein sighed as he put away the brass key. With the room beside him being the servants' sleeping quarters, he took out holy night powder and released his spirituality to seal off the storage room, making any commotion from within impossible to leak out. Then he took out a candle and placed it on a crate in front of him. "Puh!" He snapped his finger and produced a light blue spirituality fire on his fingertip. After the candle wick was lit, he summoned himself using ritualistic magic and then responded to himself above the gray fog. Less than a minute later, Klein was floating in the room, facing his body whose eyes had lost their luster. After familiarizing himself with this feeling, he wrapped the ancient and exquisite Aztec copper whistle to stabilize his spirit body and made it stronger. It caused a chilly wind to begin to swirl in the room. At the same time, he also used this power to slightly change the appearance of his illusory spirit body, causing it to appear as if there was a layer of paint on its face. After doing all of this, Klein took a box of common matches he randomly bought off the streets, cut out a transparent door in the wall of spirituality, and headed out. Action time. He silently encouraged himself, and just like a real ghost, he passed through the residential buildings, one by one, before successfully arriving outside the Royal Museum. There was no need to activate his spirit vision. In this state, he could clearly see every security personnel, their aura, and emotions which unreservedly betrayed them. Finding the withered lawn and the iron-black lamppost that faced the hall window, Klein didn't swagger over just because ordinary people couldn't see him. Instead, he followed the shadows and took an elusive route. He passed through the sculpted tree and obstacles before cautiously arriving at his destination. He stuck close to the wall, as he couldn't guarantee that the security personnel didn't comprise of a member of the machinery hivemind. At this moment, the 4 security guards on the rooftop, who were carefully inspecting their respective areas of operations, were like blind people. They failed to discover anything. Klein didn't enter the exhibition hall directly, because his spiritual perception and intuition told him that the museum floor was shrouded in a mysterious power. It also had to do with how he couldn't confirm if there were Beyonders inside. He followed his plan and circled to another area, to the washroom that was closer to the exhibition hall that housed Roselle's diary. Then, he threw the box of matches he had brought with him through the vent. Next, he flew up and entered the second floor,